well, I don't have controlled substances, so this will be medical office will be my definition, or like radiology is another one. You can go get an x-ray and sit in the radiologist, okay, well, this is what you've got an issue with. They don't have medication to give you, so fine, you're in and out the same day. But if it's like the, urgent cares where they accept the ambulance and all that stuff, it's a different definition, but it's same premise. You're medically, a medical physician or licensed in the state and all that. And then if you're administering any drugs, that's where you have the DEA license as well. And then if you're basically running a facility with neither the physician at the helm or DEA license, you need CUP. So
How about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. So when you get to this point,
We're gonna have some public input as well.
What I know, yeah, I kind of just done a quick front back.
Okay?
The emails were slow, so I was wondering.
What?
The emails through the county.
I gotta get organized too. I got a mess roll.
Yes.
I really didn't want to even meet the gentleman there. I just wanted to see the lay of the land. You look at him overhead all day, but it just.
I'd like to call to order the May work session for the Louisa County Planning Commission. Begin with some ordinance discussions. The first one on retail sale of controlled substances. Mr. Kuhn, you're good.
Afternoon, Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. I believe you have the changes in your agenda packet. I believe the memo clearly delineates the changes, so this would allow for inpatient, outpatient care, as well as still account for the retail sale of controlled substance. Reason for the changes is this should allow more of the medical facilities that are run by a licensed physician and or have a licensed physician and DEA license. So we made sure we delineated those uses from retail sale of controlled substances, which would be a business that essentially sold controlled substance with no DEA license or medical professional. And I stand ready to answer any questions.
I've got a question.
Mr. Goodwin.
Look at it. State code through Medicare allows in-home care, not necessarily licensed. Is that included in your consideration? It's been a concern in Richmond for a while because they have no way to, the way it's written, they have no way to go in and see whether people are actually doing anything or just staying in the houses with them. But it is part of the Medicare program.
For this, we would be looking at, I mean, I guess if it was the home base of an organization that was providing inpatient
This
care,
is usually family members that I'm talking about, not necessarily certified. It's when
so that wouldn't be a zoning use if that was occurring. That wouldn't be something they would get a zoning permit for.
okay. Good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions?
Just comment, I think it's great what they came up with.
As usual,
Yeah.
staff's got our back.
Yeah.
And I'd like to thank them for another nice size packet. This is 2 months in a row.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah, if there are no further questions, then we'll move on to the next item, which is Land Development Regulations Phase 3. Ms. Buckler.
Good evening, Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. We've been through this several times now, so I'm going to try to keep it really brief. You do have a new copy in front of you that's not much different from what was in your package. There's a few minor grammatical punctuation corrections, that sort of thing, but nothing major as far as the text itself. These amendments include recommendations to definitions for additional definitions, deletion of some definitions, and then amending some of the current definitions. We've updated the short-term rental of a dwelling section to include the RD district, which was inadvertently left out of the original amendment, and to correct the effective date of the ordinance. We've addressed yard regulations in the A1 and A2 zoning districts, which include the growth areas for structures greater than 50 feet in height. We've removed that additional setback. For consistency on minimum road frontage requirements, we've included language that just directs individuals to the code section. It was in one zoning district, but not in all of them. And for subdivision plat requirements and standards, we've amended language to provide plan review by licensed engineers or surveyors, which was requested at the last meeting to include surveyors, to require a performance agreement for new subdivisions that would require completion of the improvements within a set time. Clarifies that the county has no obligation to install or maintain any improvements or roads that are part of a subdivision based on language in the state code. Addresses private lanes in a subdivision and requires that the security or guarantee that's posted for a project is reviewed every 24 months to ensure that sufficient funds remain in place for project completion. And in that section, there is a note. What has been put in is based on language that we found from Greene County. What that actually directs you to the construction cost index published by Engineering News Record. That was the only locality that we found actually that had a publication that used to calculate or the increase or decrease based on the market. Other localities use a flat percentage increase or other methods. So this is what we put in here. Where if there's other thoughts about how that should be calculated at the end of that 24 months. Like I said, other localities used a flat rate or required that the developer's engineer provide a new cost update at the end of the 24 months.
Mr. Chairman, question?
Yeah, Mr. Dickinson.
Have we had problems with this?
We have with older subdivision projects. When the General Assembly adopted in 2009, I think was the original emergency legislation for the housing crisis. It kept getting extended every couple of years over about a 15 year period. So monies that we had in place for subdivisions that weren't completed at that time are insufficient to complete them now. So yes, there have been issues. We are trying to put mechanisms in place that will reduce that in the future or eliminate that in the future.
And using the cost index, that's a pretty easy way to do it. It doesn't take a lot of staff time and,
You do have to have a subscription to the publication, but like I said, it was the only locality that I found that actually had a document that it used to calculate that increase. Others, like I said, just used either a flat percentage increase or required the developer's engineer to provide the documentation.
thank you.
Mr. Goodwin?
I do appreciate you remembering that I couldn't see the line through the 4. So, and not only that, you put it in red so I could see it here. For some time, we have been talking about getting out of the buffer design business and requiring people to put in a buffer vegetative plan established by a landscaper with some specialty in arbor design, and we just approve it. Is that ready for prime time yet, or we still got to work on it? Because we've been talking about this, I want to say, for 4 or 5 months,
It's been a while.
well back
It
into the
has.
fall.
Before
Right.
that, I think.
Part of the definition was amended, and then we've added some additional language to help, I think, try to clarify or make it more clear what was allowed or what could be done. And this goes back to when we reduced the setbacks for commercial properties adjoining agricultural and residential properties, like in the first phase of amendments. Because when the growth area overlay districts were adopted, it increased the setback requirements, which made some existing commercial properties almost unbuildable because of the increased setbacks. So we reduced the setbacks back to what they were prior to 2021, but we added language at the Planning Commission's request to require buffering within that reduced setback, and this was just to provide more information on what type of buffering would be required.
Mr. Chair, follow up.
Mr. Goodwin?
It really, to me anyway, it doesn't matter what the thickness is, the width. What matters to me is we get a plan that someone who knows, I mean, for years, all we did was say, plant arborvitae. Good thing it's not an invasive plant like kudzu. But we have been saying, you give us a plan by someone who knows what they're doing, and we will see. And it doesn't make any difference whether it's 10 foot, 300 foot, or whatever. I still would like to see them give us a plan and we approve it. And I'm not seeing it in any of the writing yet. And maybe it's because we haven't had a public hearing on it, if we need to do that for an ordinance change, but that's why I asked if it was ready for prime time, because it ought to be. We've been talking about this for, I want to say, well back into the fall.
So in one of the, I believe it was phase 1, it could have been phase 2 at this point in the amendments, we did add language that when staff reviews a site plan, that we can choose to forward that to the Planning Commission for their review and recommendation on the buffer that's being proposed, if it's not part of like a rezoning or conditional use permit action that you all would get anyways. So we did add that language, but we can certainly.
But we didn't require them to have, excuse me, follow up. We didn't require them to have someone certified that's in the business. They just gave you a plan of trees.
That's correct, but we can certainly, that's what this discussion is here for in the work session now. We can certainly add that language, amend what we have
I
proposed.
don't remember a vote on that, but it seemed like the majority of the people were in favor of it. Because we were bungling it, to be perfectly honest, as a county, you know. So, wanted to get
Okay.
rid of that burden. And that's all I have, ma'am, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, making a couple of notes.
That's fine. Take your time.
Okay, so. Okay, I've had to remember where I was, sorry. In plat approvals for subdivisions, we have included language that requires the current private road disclosure statement to be included on all subdivision plats, even if it's proposed to be taken into the state system. And it would be worded such that until such time as the road is accepted into the state secondary road system, that they are considered private roads. We also use an interim road maintenance agreement for subdivisions with new internal roads that basically states the same thing, that it has to be completed and recorded with a new subdivision, that the roads are private, the responsibility and maintenance is of the developer or whoever they assign that responsibility to, is not to the county. And we have, at the request of the Planning Commission, we've added language that a note will be placed on the subdivision plats that an entrance permit must be obtained from VDOT for access to each lot shown on the subdivision plat. Under the Lake Anna Shoreline Use and Design Standards, we've clarified that dry hydrants and restroom facilities will only be required if required by the Department of Fire and EMS and the Department of Health respectively. And if these facilities are required by those agencies, the location would be coordinated with Dominion Energy. Under telecommunications regulations, we've clarified that generators may be located on site but only operated during power outages or testing. Currently, they're not allowed on site full-time. And most telecommunication towers, they automatically come in with a generator. And there's also additional language for structural reports and analysis to be submitted for co-location applications to confirm structure safety and integrity of existing towers. And this has been recommended by the new telecommunications consultant that we went with last year when the last contract was up. Sign regulations has mostly been focused on electronic message signs at the request of the board that be addressed. This is a little bit different than what we talked about at the last meeting. We've done some additional research. We took the Planning Commission's advice and downloaded an app, Mr. Kuhn did, and went around to several signs and did not have a whole lot of luck with that type of measurement. So we went back to the drawing board and did some more research and found information with Fairfax County that the International Sign Association had worked with them on a nit measurement, or candela measurement. And so we contacted Fairfax and they provided us some really good information. And so that's the method that we have put in the package as being recommended, with several options and several nit levels, because different organizations have different recommended levels for daytime and nighttime. We're mostly focused on the nighttime levels. And we looked at a lot of the localities around us. Everybody seems to do electronic message signs differently. So what we found with Fairfax's ordinance and how they regulate and measure with the nits, it seems to be very straightforward. With the previous method we were looking at, you had, depending on the size of the sign, you had to be a certain distance away when you took the measurement. Using the luminance rather than the illuminance, you basically just point the gun, and as long as you are looking at the sign and it's got the sign in focus, then you don't have to be a certain distance from it. You don't have to worry about the size and calculating how far you need to be to make those measurements. With that, I'm
Excuse me,
sorry.
this is something y'all can readily available confirm in the field?
Yes,
Oh, okay. The nit.
in the nits, yes.
Man, I've learned a lot about sign, I haven't learned, I've just read a
Yeah,
lot.
I've got one of those signs too.
I have read a lot about electronic message signs.
More than you wanted to.
So,
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Goodwin?
I wanted to ask this last month. What is the rationale by saying that a sign must be up for a minimum of 20 seconds? I mean, I go by these, a lot of them are churches, the city of Mineral. They're not 20 seconds, and if they were, I wouldn't see but one message.
and again, that is one of the intervals that the sign message changes, varies from locality to locality. It's another area of the ordinance that is really, up for discussion, what the planning commission and the board may choose. Some of them, the interval requirements are 1 minute. So you'd never, I think, I'm not sure that you'd ever see, one message. Some are 20 seconds, it just varies from locality to locality, and again, different.
Is it a public safety, excuse me, Mr. Chair, follow up, is it a public safety issue that people will be too attracted to?
I think the brightness, the flashing, or the way the sign changes, the intervals that it changes at could all be distraction
Okay.
for drivers. So, but like I said, it is really, seems to be a preference in the localities because they all kind of vary.
Okay. Yeah, I meant to ask that last month and didn't. Thank you, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Buckler, a question for you. You have these requirements for illumination placed in pretty much all zoning districts except residential and agricultural. Is there a reason for that?
Again, we drafted about 4 different options. We gave you all 2. These came from what some of the surrounding localities do. Some localities require that all electronic message signs have a conditional use permit, which is one of our lower options. Some require a special exception, or what is similar to the special exception process here, which just goes to the Board of Supervisors. Some are administrative, and some are administrative with options to take them to the board or the planning commission based on what's being proposed. So we put together several different options. Again, it is a preference by the planning commission, for a recommendation to the board. We just kind of gave some different options to go through for consideration.
All right, because I see on page 16, but page 27 of the package for work session, that if you're interested in the special exception permit, it applies to all zoning districts. But other than that, the next line is for administrative review by the zoning administrator or designee with an option to send it to the board. And here, we don't discuss residential or agricultural. For electronic sign, I would be interested in agricultural and having some limitations. This would have no limitations at all on it, but I think we're certainly interested in things like dark sky lighting and that sort of thing in agricultural. So, an electronic sign with no limits might run
So
counter to that, in my estimation, unless I'm reading this wrong.
So the way the second option there is recommended, the administrative review with the option to send to the board, is that they would not be allowed in agricultural or residential.
It's only for these districts.
Only
I
permitted.
see, I see.
Yes, sir.
All right, so,
And
all right,
otherwise,
I see it that way
and
now.
otherwise, it'd have to
With
get
the
a special
exception of
exception.
churches.
Um,
Churches can have them anywhere, town of Mineral.
According to this?
Yeah,
All right.
but they kind of get a free ride anyway, I get it, but we're not really covered by zoning, because when a church comes in, wants to put a sign in, they just do it. Separation of church and state, huh?
That's one way to look at it.
Yeah. I do have a question. Since we've been
good.
using the word sign but not electronic, and both of these, I would think, are either in residents built in agricultural districts or residential districts along the highway, homes. I was out on the road today riding around, and I saw two signs, not electric, in yards that have been up 10 to 15 years. I wanted to come home but didn't have the time to go back and look at the ordinance, and I knew you'd know the answer right off the top of your head. What ordinance do we have for these homeowners that put up what I will call a message sign on a permanent basis? I mean, a political sign's got to be down in 90 days. But these things have been up 10 to 15 years, and I mean most of y'all have seen, I know Gordon has, beware dog killer next door, okay? And that sign's been up 10, 15 years, if not longer.
Yes, sir. So right now, our code enforcement operates on a complaint-based system. So while there may be signs that have been placed, we operate on a complaint-based system. So our staff does not ride around looking for violations to,
You don't have to look hard for this one, but, well, I guess what I'm saying is there something in the ordinance that gives the compliance folks guidance on what to do when they see one of these signs?
if we were to receive a complaint and it was investigated and they didn't have the proper permits, then yes, there are methods in the ordinance that it would either have to be removed or they would have to apply for the proper sign permits if
Okay.
there was a category that it fit in.
Okay, Gordon, you gotta get your people complaining more. Thank you, Linda, thank you, Mr. Chair.
I got a feeling that was in somebody's will to leave it alone.
All right, continue on.
Basically, that's it. Like I said, there are different options for the electronic message signs. Depending on the process, we can mix, we can match, we can look at the nit levels for nighttime. Fairfax, what we found, how we found them was in an article from the International Sign Association that they had worked with Fairfax to increase the nit level at night from 100 nits to 300 nits. There are other documents or organizations that say in rural areas that 100 nits is a good level, but again, it's going to be preference, and we tried to find some videos or examples of how we could show the different nit levels, but we didn't have much luck with that.
I'll be honest, Mr. Chairman, I'm
Mr.
not
Goodwin.
schooled to be able to comment on nit levels and intervals and things like that. If staff has done the research and believes that what they found applies to this county, I will have to trust them, because I couldn't tell you 2 nits from 2,000 nits, or however they measure. Be perfectly honest with you.
I would agree. I have had some training and some work in illumination in my career over time, but we never talked about nits. We talked about
immature lice.
yeah. We talked about candelas. We talked about I can't even call it now. The foot candles. We talked about all sorts of things, and depending on industrial use, you have to have light levels for different things you're doing. But I've never dealt with nits, and I've never dealt with outside signs, so I tend to be in agreement with you on that. It seems to me like if we're generally in line with what other localities have found to be effective, then it's probably a good start. until we find out
Have no
that
basis
something
to
needs
question.
adjustment. So, yeah, I'm kind of on board the same way. Does any other commissioners have any other thoughts on it?
Just where y'all are, I didn't know, the one near I knew of was one George talking about. So, I'm with the
I
state.
think we got another comment.
Mr. Coon.
Yeah, one other item just to discuss about the nits that does benefit the locality is that nits can be measured daytime or nighttime. So that's the benefit, is that our code enforcement could actually check it at 2 o'clock in the afternoon to 8 o'clock at night. We don't have to wait until the sun goes down. So when I tried to do the app, after the last meeting, I was out at 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night, trying to get a reading at 100 feet, and it was nothing. And this nits, you can actually take it within 5 feet of the sign, and it'll tell you what that brightness is, regardless of the time of day. It's just measuring the brightness of that sign. So enforcement ability in the operation of, executing that enforcement would be much easier with nits, and that's why you're starting to see more organizations go towards it, because I don't want to try and tell a code enforcement officer he's got to, come in super late and stay out till 9 o'clock at night to get this measurement in.
Sure.
But that's a main factor, and one of the reasons why we determined this was the best
I
action.
trust staff on this. Mr.
Absolutely. Now, I guess we do have one thing to deal with, whether we go with option 1 or option 2. And Ms. Buckler, I see very few differences, but besides a nit level and a period of time. Is that the difference between option 1 and option 2?
Where they're located. So if it went through the special exception process to the board, it would be allowed in all districts.
Oh, right.
If it was the administrative review, we have not included agricultural or residential districts, but we could do that. The maximum level after sunset and the cutoff time, that is proposed. And these were just different options based on other localities.
So this is a laundry list that y'all can circle which ones you like and cross out the ones you don't.
And we can mix and match them.
It was just we wanted to make sure you all had the full variety to say which ones. So that's why, like, you can see where it's C1 and growth area. If you wanted both C1 in and out of growth area, you could just both of those. C2 in and out of growth area, you can circle both of those. And then same thing for the nits. That's what the recommended range there is, between 300 and 400. And then the same thing time-wise. Normally the cutoff is between 10 and 11 in sunrise. So it's
Right.
whatever you guys want, we can. It's just really, it's picking which of the first box you want, and then from there we can pick the zoning. So really, it's however you guys want to do it.
I'm good with you.
Do the commissioners have, Mr. Dickerson?
Well, I do. If we're gonna be a rural county, I kinda like excluding the agriculture and the residential in that second option and keeping it at a lower net level. Again, I don't know about nits. I've been called a nitwit, but, that's something else. But you say some have it at 100 or so?
Yes, Fairfax, they increased theirs from 100 to 300, but in some of the organization documentation, for rural areas, they recommend 100 nits at night, but those organizations also vary in their recommended nit levels.
If we're gonna be rural, I'd almost go with a lower
I agree.
nit level
I would agree too.
of, say, 100, since that was the,
In the ag district.
no,
Ag
it's
and
not allowed in
residential.
ag.
Not allowed in ag.
Not allowed in ag or
So
residential,
you're speaking of all districts?
all the rest of the districts.
Yeah. So this would be on packet page 27, the work session. This would be the bottom choice. Actually, it would be both choices, wouldn't it? Well, it would be the bottom choice.
The bottom,
The bottom choice
Yeah.
would be the one we'd be recommending.
and have that
You'd
more
be
extended
recommending.
time period, 10 to sunrise instead of 11 to sunrise.
And I don't want to confuse the issue more than it is. Do we have a particular definition for sunrise? Because there are definitions for sunset and sunrise.
We have not defined sunset and sunrise.
I thought Noah said that, Mr. Chairman. I'm serious. You get that out of like
Yes, yes.
Wakefield?
I'm
and-
sorry, I had the wrong Noah. I was trying to figure the reference there, but, so,
I
yeah, it
think that comes out of like Wakefield and different places for
does.
different parts of the
It
country.
does. I didn't know
I
if,
know that's what the wildlife people can depend on.
well, that's what FAA regulations go with too.
Yeah.
So, but I didn't know if the county used any particular definition or,
We do not, but we can certainly look that up.
I'm not suggesting that you have to have a definition, but, you know, if you're gonna run something till sunrise, you ought to know when that starts, I guess.
Chairman, would
Mr.
it be
Dickerson.
easier for enforcement to say 7 AM instead of sunrise, and just, since we got a flat time 10 PM?
Mr. Coon?
With sunrise and sunset changing throughout the year and daylight savings, no, I would not recommend having a set time like 7 a.m. Because you'll have in the fall and winter, it may still be dark outside when the sign's able to be illuminated, and then vice versa in the summertime, sun may be up for an hour or two. So, I mean, sunrise and sunset is one of those that it can only mean one thing: when the sun is up for the day and when it goes down for the day. I hope common sense would prevail in that situation, but
Starts early in the morning, not over till late at night.
that's it.
All right, very good.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
if
Payne.
if I may, I guess my question is, if they're meeting the requirements of the NITS, why, and this is obviously for the traveler down the highway system, why are we cutting them off? Why do we cut the signage off? If they've met the requirements? And again, another question is, do any of us understand what 300 nits looks like illumination-wise? Would we be more cautious to set it at a lower level? You said another level was 100 nits. Would it make more sense to do that? It'd be much easier to raise it than it would to lower it when someone's already, you know, gone through the expense of signage. Just a thought I had on it.
We did try to find examples, like I said, videos to show what the different nit levels may look at by turning the lights off and showing videos, but we were not able to find anything. And I believe, Mr. Dickerson, you did recommend that we
100.
reduce this from 300 to 100.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Goodwin?
I tend to agree with Commissioner Painting. I would say a great percentage of these signs are commercial, and we turn them off during business hours. Or we turn them on during business hours. What do we,
We're limiting the illumination during 10 PM to sunrise.
oh, I got you.
Sunrise to
backwards.
10 PM, it doesn't appear we have a limitation on illumination, so they can crank them up. Is that my understanding?
So if you all set the nit limit, that would be the brightest the sign could be.
During,
After sunset.
between 10 PM and
Anytime.
sunrise.
This is just
Anytime.
the
He says you
nighttime
can
level,
measure
because
the
daytime
brightness after
levels are
sunset.
higher.
Yeah.
Look at the top.
But that's not the way the chart reads, though.
No, not the
This is
chart,
just
what he said. What he said was you can measure day and night. If you set it at 100, it's 100 day or night.
Well, I understand that, but I'm reading the chart here, and the
I-
chart gives you a limitation from 10 PM to
Right.
sunrise. It doesn't tell you what you can do between sunrise and
That's
10
so
PM.
that's cutoff time means the sign is off.
Okay,
So they wouldn't be able to crank it up. It would be off completely. That's what the cutoff time is discussing. They wouldn't be able to turn it up bright at 10 p.m.
That, Mr. Chair.
I'm,
And
Go ahead,
I
Mr.
can
Goodwin.
think of the number of businesses that are open at least till 9, and then some of them are open, like the fast food places are open till 11, 10 or 11, and we're saying you can't have a sign on?
And that, to go to Mr. Painting's point, if we limit it to 100 nits at night, maybe we don't have a cutoff time at all. This is just one of the options that we provided. There's some localities that have a cutoff time. If we don't want to do that, we want to prioritize it in the commercial areas. We set the nits to 100 nits at nighttime. Once sun goes down, then we run it all night long. That's fine. This is just an option for you all. But originally, because some localities have a cutoff time. That's what we had. Some even, was it midnight, I think was the latest, or 1 a.m. There were some that,
Or when the business closes.
that was another one that so there's a lot of stuff out there.
Kinda
We
like
just tried
that
to.
too, because you've got 24-hour businesses. I don't know if we've got them in the county, but a lot of them out there.
We didn't
I like
use-
when the business closes.
Yeah, we didn't choose that option or make that as part of one of the recommendations, although we can certainly do that, just because all the businesses may close at different times, so trying to keep track of what time the business closes. So we went with something that's more consistent across the board.
I can
But
understand that
as
too.
Mr. Coon said, if we're gonna reduce it to 100, we may not want to
I
have
would
them
think
cut
they're
off.
gonna turn it off anyway to save money. They're in business.
I'm a little curious, these are electronic signs, so these are message signs. So why would a business not have an electronic message sign on during the day when they're open? Am I missing something?
They're gonna have it on.
They're gonna have it
during the day.
on.
We're talking about tonight.
We're
Well-
just not regulating it.
Well, see, that's what I was saying by the chart, but I guess I misread the chart.
No,
Was-
the knit level is only after sunset. We have not given a knit level for the daytime, so they are on during the day. Daytime knit levels go up in the thousands.
But that's what I said. That's what I said earlier. And
You had said,
Mr. Coons, you said they cut the sign off. It turns off. It's cut off.
from 10 p.m. to sunrise, 10 p.m. at night till sunrise, we had on here that it was cut off. At sunrise, they then could cut it on to a brighter level, which at that point the nits isn't as much of a safety issue because the sun is up. So then, yes, they would be bright during the daytime during business hours. Then once the sun sets, then that's where the nit level comes into play, limiting it to, which recommendation on the floor now is 100 nits. And it would be that until the recommendation we had would be 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. It would cut off and be off.
Yeah, now I see what you got going with I have read this chart wrong from the very beginning, first time I looked at it. So, so actually the column says maximum level of sign brightness after sunset. We're suggesting now, we take these last two columns and it would be a maximum bright, if we said 100 nits, it would be 100 nits from this period of time to that period of time. You don't have one column really.
Well, not necessarily. So
Because-
it'd be from, if the sun sets at 7 p.m., it'd be from 7 to 10 or 11 p.m. It would just have to be dead. The
Right.
whole purpose of this is that the safety issue is when people are driving at night after the sun goes down and those signs are bright in their eyes.
I
So
understand.
that's where it needs to be reduced. And then if we're going to cut it off, pick a cutoff time.
I understand.
So that,
If we're
And-
gonna, but if we're gonna leave it on all night at 100 nits, then we only have one column.
correct.
Correct.
We don't need two.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Goodwin.
And a business could come in and ask for an exception if they're open until midnight or 24 hours, and we'd consider the commercial impact on them. But we want most of them off by a certain time, unless you can come in and give us a valid reason. That makes sense to me.
And at that point, using the option that you all are going with, if they wanted an exception, then staff would refer it to the board for a special exception.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Mr. Payne.
Mr. Coon, Ms. Buckler, I just want to clarify that we're not speaking about monument signs such as McDonald's or Wells Fargo business signs. We're just talking about electronic messaging signs, which we are in rural America are now seeing present at the school systems and churches. Is that where the category we're in?
Mainly, correct.
Oh, And when this first came up, I know one in particular that I passed, and it's extremely bright at night. And that's what I thought this had derived from. I just wanted to clarify that's what we are speaking of, not the typical monument signs that are in place in commercial areas. Thank you, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Goodwin.
but more and more, we're seeing a combination, Commissioner Payne. We'll see, I think Ace, for example, will have the big A sign, and right below it, an electronic sign.
They do, yes, sir.
I think Gibson's and Mineral has a separate electronic sign for their sales.
I would consider that an electronic messaging device.
Right. But we are seeing combinations in signage now. I don't know if that affects our consideration, but it's
To me,
not just a McDonald's against a brick wall.
If it's a change in messaging sign,
Yeah.
it's very clear.
So we're not addressing lighted or illuminated signs, just electronic message boards where the message changes or scrolls, they're different.
But that's what Ace does. That's also what Gibson's does.
Exactly.
I think Ace is a scroll, Gibson's is a flash. I agree, I think Gibson's is an electronic sign, but I want to make sure we're addressing those combinations too. We telling Ace, for example, you got to turn off the lower sign, but you can leave on the upper sign,
In that scenario, yes.
Yes.
okay? Okay, I'm good. Just want to be clear, that's all. We'll come
If
back
we-
and talk about this thing again.
Right, if we use a cutoff time, then yes, they would have to cut off the bottom portion and they could leave the lighted
Right,
portion on. But if we remove the cutoff time and just have the maximum nit level beginning at sunset, then they could leave it on, but the nit level would have to be reduced.
Is 100 nits, since we've picked that, 300, I guess, is what Fairfax had used as the highest, say? Do we have any comparison to, from 300 to 0, we're gonna say 100? Is that any illumination or any nits?
I was gonna say, I believe 100 nits is 100% higher than 0, but no, we don't. That's what Linda was talking about earlier.
be exponential.
We were trying to find a way to show it, but it's the brightness of the screen, so it's hard to come up with any reference other than if someone's going and standing next to the sign and measuring it for you to see with your own eyes. It's difficult for us to. We can't print something out for you to see like the difference because it's like the brightness of the screen.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we're gonna regulate something, we're gonna say all you can have is 100 nits and you can't see it.
No, at nighttime when the sun's down, 100 nits for a rural locality. I mean, that's all these different sign organizations and everything else say for a rural locality, 100 nits is within the range of reasonable and everything else. In Fairfax, they've got all the street signs and street lights and everything else on top of just the ambient light they have, that 300 is reasonable, but that would be, my opinion, excessive for Louisa. So.
Yeah, it just occurred to me, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go.
just occurred to me that all the examples, just about all of them that we've been talking about are inside city limits
Yes.
or town limits. So, and we don't have any control there.
Correct.
So we're talking about Zions and maybe our growth areas and handful, churches definitely, they're in there. But outside of the towns, there ain't that many.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe when they
Yeah,
find a
like I
good
said,
piece
the
of nits,
growth,
there won't
the
be
growth
more.
areas may become an issue.
What, May?
Growth areas. Identified.
All right, then, I'm gonna try and sum us up here where we are,
Please.
more or less. Ms. Buckler, maybe you've heard enough to, my understanding is the chart, we were looking at the second row on the chart is where we wanted to go with that. And, if we make the maximum level 100 nits, then, I don't know that we settled on a cutoff time, and I don't know that we need a cutoff time. So, does anyone feel strongly about a cutoff time if we settle on 100 nits?
Till I see it, I wouldn't know.
Right. And I think a business is gonna cut it off anyway, rather than run it all night long and run a bill up.
I'm kind of torn on that. I think a business that might want to market to people driving by when they're closed, so they can turn around and come back when they're open, it might be good to let them have the option. If they wanna leave it on all night and spend the money, then that would be okay. If they wanna turn it off, then save the money. That would be the business's
Sure.
option, so that's
What
kind
we're
of,
saying is that we limit to 100,
right,
we can take the times off.
right.
Just trying to finish the sum up here, and I appreciate the help on it. Was there anything further that you needed input on to settle on where we were on the options?
Are you guys good with the zoning districts in the second box as well? The C1, C2, IND, I1, I2,
Yes,
RD, and PUD?
yes.
Back to the question about schools and churches, do we have an issue? Are we creating problems for churches or schools in any of these zoning classifications? If we don't have A and R,
They would not be allowed.
they would not be allowed in A and R.
Which means they would have to get a special exception from the board.
Exactly. They can always come for a special exception.
That, Mr. Chair, that would include commercial activity within the growth areas we identified, like off 64, and
If it was in,
they'd have to get an exception.
if it was an A1 or A2,
Would that be considered a negative for somebody looking to relocate here with a business?
no, because they can have signage. It's just they'd have to get a special exception if they wanted the variable message,
Okay.
or the electronic message sign. And that's all they would have to come for would be the message sign. So the business itself.
That's me, I'm a Gateways fan, so I.
Very good. All right. Are you in good shape, Ms. Buckley?
I'm in good shape.
Very good. Anything else, the commissioners have any
Glad
commentary
you
on?
kept that short, by the way.
Yeah,
You said I'm gonna keep it short
Okay,
because we've been over it. I'm glad you kept it short.
Mr. Painting.
Ms. Buckley, if I could get you to go backwards, you're so good at what you do that you move so quickly, because you know what you're doing. You made a comment about subdivisions on VDOT road and pipe entrance. So every parcel inside that subdivision has to go through VDOT to get a road pipe entrance
They
installed?
have to get an entrance permit, yes, sir, for when they are ready to build or
And-
put
and-
in the
And
entrance.
is that a change from what is now?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
It's the same, okay.
the same.
Thank you.
Be built to state standards. Well, it's in the
Well, I
system.
guess
now.
it is a change from when we used to get them. Oh, it's the interest permit?
Entrance permit, yes, sir. Typically in the subdivisions that I do, I mean, we just put the pipe in the ground. It's no VDOT,
If the road has not yet been accepted,
there you go.
VDOT will not issue a permit, but when they go to accept the road into the state
It
system.
becomes a state road.
They are gonna check those entrances that they were installed to VDOT requirements.
Gotcha.
Mr. Barlow.
Is this what we're discussing now pertaining to the subdivision entrances and stuff?
Right, the note on the plat that all entrances would have to get an entrance permit.
Yeah, and what has happened is VDOT is no longer reviewing or approving the plats.
Yes, sir.
So what they're saying is they will review and approve the entrance when an application is made for that entrance. And so this note is to be placed on the plat, letting any prospective buyer know that you don't have an approved entrance. You have to go to VDOT and get it approved at the time that you make application for the entrance. And it's a way of moving the subdivision process along, since we've hit sort of a stalemate with VDOT. Now, they used to, they would come out, look at the entrances on the ground and say, yeah, that looks good. So when the plats got to them, they would review them and say, we've already looked at this, so they moved that process along. Now, they're no longer doing that, so we're stuck. You can't,
Yeah, they ain't keeping up the roads either.
well,
Wonder what they are doing.
I mean, it's pretty clear they've even come to us and told us some years ago, they would like Louisiana County to do like Henrico and take over the secondary roads.
Evolution.
Exactly, that's
Yep.
the word.
It's been a discussion.
Don't think that's gonna happen, but right now, the problem we have is where they used to review the plats, and the note before, where they signed off on the plat, clearly said the only thing they were reviewing was the entrances. And that's what they were okay, well, now they're not doing that. So, what do? You can't meet our prior ordinance, said we've gotta have VDOT approval, that they're not doing. So that's the reason this is coming forward.
Mr. Chair, the main thing to piggyback on that, the main thing that I object to is they're not doing safety studies, either on traffic counts or like sight distances and all. And we don't do safety studies. And there was talk about something happening in Cuckoo, right at the intersection of 33 and 522 on that corner. And I said, well, how the hell are you gonna get in and out of that with a turning lane and 55-mile-an-hour traffic and putting something right in that radius heading to Monroe? I know it's zone commercial, but how you gonna get in it? And no, they won't study that. They'll just look at the entrance. You put it up by the turning lane, they'll say, well, that's commercial interest. Check the box.
I think there are gonna be some more things coming forward as well. This is just one specific thing that we're trying to address, because the way the ordinance is currently written, Linda's hands are tied because it requires VDOT approval. VDOT won't review it, and the last one that we did, they did make changes without going to the field. And all of a sudden, where we had placed driveways, the best place we could get them, there's one had a power pole in the way. I mean, where they had moved the entrance to, there's a power pole. Down on Indian Creek Road, there's a 5-foot cut, and they weren't using a already approved VDOT entrance that they installed right around the curve, because they wanted to track the entrance to be on Indian Creek Road. But my point is, you can't sit in the office and make changes or reviews without going to the field. I mean, it's a mess.
And that's to do it in the summertime when the leaves are on the trees. You want to get sight distance.
Yeah. But this is.
I
this
want to
is-
thank staff for their work on this, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, I got one question for Linda. that I forgot
Mr.
to
Brooks.
add. Look, Linda, the removal of a third-party review, construction plans. So what's the process now? They submit plans, the engineer surveyor submits a set of plans to the county.
For road plans, they are sent to VDOT.
They are sent to VDOT, and
Yes.
VDOT is accepting plans to review them now?
They have indicated to us that they are accepting and
okay.
reviewing road plans.
Okay, all right, so that's why I was trying to figure, it had to be a third person involved here somewhere, and I wasn't sure where it went, so we've done a 180 on that.
Correct.
That's a good thing, I think, I hope.
We are positive that it is gonna be a good thing.
Okay, thank you, ma'am,
Yes, sir.
good information.
Have they, is this something that has come about recently?
This change came about, I believe we explained about the developer who had looked into the third-party engineering cost for plan review and inspections. And it was gonna be a 50,000 plus increase to their cost. And they contacted VDOT, and then staff and administration had a meeting with VDOT And VDOT said they are reviewing road plans and they are providing, they may not give an approval, but they give a concurrence or that they have no further comments on the plan set, which is to indicate to staff that it is an approval without calling it an approval.
That was my question. If then, when I last heard about it, it sounded as though they were still not gonna give an approval. So they're gonna review it, make comments, and then, so that gets back to the question, is VDOT, when we do a subdivision plat, is VDOT gonna sign off on the plat?
They do not sign the plat, they give us a concurrence letter, and from that concurrence letter, we are making a note on the plat, and the same thing with the road plans, it would be a concurrence or no further comment letter.
And because of that, and they're not providing an approval, that's why we've gone through and removed any requirement for VDOT approval on all these different items, because they have clearly said they will not be issuing any approvals. So that's why we've gone through, and anywhere in our ordinance that requires a VDOT approval to move to the next stage, that has now either already been addressed in a previous update or will be addressed in this update that's here tonight.
I think that was what I was trying to get to. Basically, what you're saying is, our ordinance is not requiring VDOT approval.
It did previously, but now we've rectified, and once we get this one that's here tonight done, everything that we require from VDOT to move forward should be rectified to where we can still send it to them for comment, we can still send it to them for review, but it's not a requirement to have an approval to move forward, which, when it's in our ordinance, we can't break the ordinance, so we needed that approval to be, before we can move forward, so that should be addressed.
I think, the concern that I have with it is still the fact that and I've had VDOT tell me this time and time again, even back to the previous, before the Love's truck stop thing, the previous one, that, their comments were recommendations. They were not, which you send a set of plans to VDOT to get comments, and then you still don't, you're not gonna get an approval, it sounds like. But they're only making, it leaves their office as a recommendation, but then it's perceived as a requirement by us because it's the recommendation that VDOT made, which is, to me, it's a crazy way to do business, but.
Mr. Chair, just a comment, I hope you and your friends on the board are talking to Senator Cyphers and Delegate Fowler. I suggested it last year to someone, and it didn't make the hit parade for some reason, because I checked our legislative priorities. But this is putting extra burden on us and having to hire additional expertise to look into things the way we like them to, want them to be looked at. It's a comment that I hope you all are doing that, or you will consider it for this year's legislative session.
We have not done it. We need to do something because VDOT is backing off of what they have done in the past.
Yeah, and my understanding is they're not passing money back to the localities for the work they're not doing now.
Well, exactly. I mean, the localities are, you're getting a lot more burdensome, in that we're gonna have to start doing this stuff, but like it's, you know, it gets to the point where they make these recommendations and you still don't know, we don't have anybody on our staff looking at it to see what you've actually gotta do. So anybody that's trying to do, development is kinda stuck in the middle. It needs to go back to where they were reviewing plans they made, presented there what had to be done, and that's what you did.
Very good. Well, I think then, unless there are any other changes, any other comments, we are done with that set of ordinance changes. So we can move on. Next item, what I'd like to do with the next item is go on to item number 2 under new business, which is development data, GIS research. We will be picking up the shelters during, if we don't have time, we'll pick them up and finish with that certainly during the discussion portion of the regular meeting. But I wanted to get this in. Mr. Eglin.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the commission. So before you on the screen, I want to zoom in a little bit. Matthias has been diligently crunching numbers since our last meeting with our GIS tool. And I'm actually going to start with Shannon Hill. We'll come back to that page. What we have been able to calculate over the last several weeks is what you were looking for is the total number of parcels within a growth area, and then how many of those are vacant. And so looking at the various...
Mr. Eglin?
Yes.
Is it possible to get the screen in front here operating? It is not operating, and it's a little hard for all the members to see. I think that's why I'm being flagged.
Yeah,
for.
that's why I'm waiting.
Other than, how you doing?
I'm not sure why that's not operating.
If
I can
it's-
magnify, I can enhance.
Can you, well, I
Set
guess
it in
that
the
screen
order.
won't tilt any further this
Got an
way.
empty chair over here if
Yeah,
somebody
you
wants
can
to
just
use
sit
it.
over here.
I can turn both screens.
Yeah.
I apologize for technical difficulty. I did not realize that screen was not working.
All right.
Can,
What happened to him? Oh, there he is.
Does that do any good at all? Yes.
I just took pictures.
I'm probably gonna wind up doing that too.
anything?
That's not cutting on.
Can you all see it with this magnification, or
Yeah.
it's probably as far as I can go? I'll say out loud what the screen is showing. So in the Shannon Hill growth area, we took all the parcel zone, agricultural, residential, resort development, and PUD. So basically anything that you could build a dwelling upon. And we determined there are 41 parcels in the Shannon Hill growth area. 48 of the 41 are zoned industrial, I-1, I-2, C-1-2. So it's actually a total of 49, I'm sorry. 8 of the 49 are zoned industrial, commercial, 41 are A1, R1, R2, RD, and PUD. But the real number we're looking at here, and I'll go ahead and highlight line 7, is we have 27 vacant parcels out of 49 that are zone A1, A2, R1, R2, PUD, or RD that could potentially be developed today. And so as we go further down, I'm going to go through each growth area, and some growth areas are larger than others.
Well, I have a question for you right away here.
Sure.
So, I don't know how many, well, you have RD there. I'm assuming RD is Clark Country.
Yes. Well, so
But
that's
is
on
that-
Gums. Yes.
But is that, that's in just a few parcels right now?
Correct.
And if fully developed as RD, that could be hundreds.
It could be.
So we got to be careful how we look at that.
And so I'm glad we bring that up. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Eglin, I was discussing this with the chairman of the board, and kind of came up with this, he asked the question of you all to come up with this data. I was really, and so was he, really interested in taking that line 7 to the next level of breaking it up and answering the question, how many parcels in this county can be developed by right? And using the data that Mr. Combs uses for the demand on county services, turning that into information that we can actually use. You know, that X number of lots are there. We have nothing to say about it. It's by right. And this, in the out years, is what we think the demand is going to be on county services.
And if that's the case, we're going to need to hire a firm to do that. We don't have the capability to make those calculations or the time on staff to do that. That's just, it's one of those that we'd have to go through each individual parcel, identify the division rights, and go through that. And that's going to be one of those that, based on staff and short of having how many are developable, and maybe we can get Matthias to pull of these parcels what the total acreage is. We cannot get that granular with it with the staff that we have and the workload we currently are experiencing. That would just be something that gets put on a back burner and we talk about it, but it just truthfully, I don't think we'd be able to get it done in the foreseeable future.
Mr. Goodwin.
That's a fair answer. I want you to know that. That's a fair answer. And it's a good question to go to the chairman of the board who's interested in this and say the same thing you just said. Because I totally get it. I know the difficulty of prying into you all's time to do things that we talk here, much less throwing new items in there. And I would try to respect that. But I just want you to know that's a fair answer.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and like I said, the data would be very helpful, but you all have to also remember that with all these parcels, even though it's one number, we'd have to look back to see two of these parcels. One parcel may be a division from a previous one, so you've got to look at every single one of these parcels, and once you start going down the list for every growth area or everywhere in the county,
What gave rise to this was the recent percentage of growth that we were kind of facing with over the last, 2020 to 2025, the growth, and I think it opened everybody's eyes. And so I was talking with Supervisor Adams, and I said, if you think that's bad, you ought to try to find out how many lots can be developed in this county, and you don't have nothing to say about it. It's by right.
But that's the whole thing is, so this board and planning commission and the board of supervisors could amend the by right uses on those parcels. So if they don't have an indefinite opportunity to build whatever they want.
I would take guidance from the board on, before we dove into that, whether they'd rather find out this information or change the by right. I'd like to have some indication, but what you're saying is perfectly fair. I will never leave out this room and say, man, that was a VDOT move. Nope, it's perfectly fair what you're saying, and I recognize that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I appreciate the being brought up that some of these growth areas we go through are going to have a planned, developments or resort developments that have not been fully built out or haven't even started, and that could be 100 acres, it could be 1,000 acres. So moving on to Gum Springs, we're going to continue to work up 64. In Gum Springs, we have a total of 533 parcels within that growth area. Of the 533, we have 210 that are currently vacant that are agricultural, residential, RD, or PUD. And in the case of Gum Springs, I don't believe there is an RD or PUD, so really this is going to be agricultural, residential. And I've sent an email with all of this information to all the commissioners as well.
I'm okay if you don't go through all of them. If you want to summarize it for the whole county.
So for the most part, Your smaller growth areas obviously are going to have less parcels. If you get into Zion's Crossroad or Lake Anna, you're going to start going into, well, we have 1,608 parcels in Zion's Crossroad, and 302 of them are vacant. Moving further down here. And just for example, like Lake Anna is our largest growth area, and it's not, it has more low density residential designation than it does mixed use or industrial. So that's where you're going to end up with 6,323 parcels, and of that 6,323, you have 1,941 that in this case could be a combination of PUD, RD, residential, or agricultural, because you have all of those zoning districts within the Lake Anna growth area. So it is what you think. The smaller the growth area, like Ferncliff, Shannon Hill, Gum Springs, you're not going to have as many vacant parcels. The larger ones, such as Zion Crossroad or Lake Anna, you're going to have a lot more vacant parcels. And then some of the other information you're seeing on the screen is Matthias went down and dove a little further into the rabbit hole of like how many parcels are in a subdivision that we know they're a subdivision, how many are not in a subdivision. But I think the number that everybody was really looking for was line 7, as Commissioner Goodwin pointed out, how many vacant parcels do we have, with the understanding that some of them could be 100 acres, 1,000 acres, or 1.5 acres. So. Any questions after that?
Yeah, Mr. Eglin, could you show both Louisa and Mineral, since Commissioner Kersey and I both had a question on that?
Absolutely. So we'll start with Louisa, and Louisa has 459 parcels in the growth area, and of the 459, we have 154 that are vacant. And then in the mineral growth area, which we saw in the previous meeting, has a very large area of low-density residential designation to it. You have 357 parcels total and 114 that are vacant.
And that's a growth area outside the town limits.
Yes.
Correct.
Got it.
We did calculate the county as a whole. Thank you, Mr. Kuhn, for bringing that up. So we have 10,143 parcels in all the growth area that are made up of our zoning classifications that we have in our matrix. And of that, we have 2,969 parcels within the growth areas alone that are currently vacant.
Yeah, and that's just the growth areas.
And that's just the growth areas, which and that's why I have the screen up here, the areas with color on them are the areas that we're pulling numbers from.
You had it all, boy. If you had that next level of information, you're talking about going Google-eyed, and you got nothing to say about it, it's by right.
And then the other item to look at is in the growth area too, we also have 614 parcels between industrial and then C1 and C2 that are ready for development as well. So we were talking about the A1 and A2, but the commercial parcels ready for development is also on there.
Yeah. Any questions for Mr. Eglin?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Kersey?
I don't have a particular question. I did raise the request for this data to begin with, as you recall. In order to properly plan, I think we need the next step to have the information. If we want to keep Louisa rural, and we are truly interested in that, these numbers tell you what it's about. And I certainly think that we need the other information. I didn't realize the chairman of the Board of Supervisors was interested in it. I know that our citizens are, because they are very concerned with the tax increases, and these numbers will definitely show us what those look like in the future as well. So I think we need the information, but I'll leave it at that.
My recommendation would be.
With respect to that, do we want to put together a recommendation on this to go to the board?
Mr. Kuhn, you were...
And that's what I was going to say, based on that statement, if you all would like that to happen, if we're going to need a consultant during regular session, there may be a motion necessary to request.
You're going to have to go out on a bid for that?
Absolutely. This is going to be over $100,000, I would assume. I mean, this is one that just the comp plan rewrite with a couple of town hall meetings was
I'll make a
eye-openingly.
donation, but it won't be that much.
Oh, it's going through this tedious data and having to
Yeah.
search every single parcel that we have in the county to figure out the division rights.
I
This would
totally
be.
get it, but that's part of planning. That,
Yeah.
it's not so much what's vacant, like you say, it could be a 500-acre vacant lot. Throw a subdivision in there, or whatever, some of the high uses. I mean, that number up there of 2669, that's gonna be so far in the rearview mirror, you're gonna have to back up to see it.
So the chair would entertain the
Well,
motion.
Motion
for
would need to
a-
happen during open session, during the 7 PM session. This is a work session.
Very well.
I would be
The,
happy with
the,
staff.
the chair
wording
will entertain.
Yeah, so I'd be happy with staff doing the wording on that. They've done it before.
So,
I'd like to make the recommendation, Mr. Chairman,
very good.
or
I'm just
Commissioner
saying,
Kersey, I mean,
wherever it comes from, the chair will be looking
at
for
least two
that.
of us are in agreement.
Yeah.
think
You might
we're in
find
agreement.
more.
Yep.
With that being said, what would you like staff to do regarding the growth areas? Are we gonna put those on hold and not address them? Or, I'm sorry, the focus areas? This is something
I
that,
don't think that it has a bearing on what we've been talking about in the focus areas.
I think you can move on with what we've recommended in the
Yeah.
focus areas for now.
I mean, if there is, I'd share it with me, because
this was, I believe the focus area conversation is what started this data. So if you are linking it, we don't wanna go and schedule a public hearing if you guys wanna wait
I
for
was,
this additional
my
data.
question in my discussion with Chairman Adams was countywide. Do you have any idea how much could happen in this county without you having any say over it? And he said, that's a heck of, well, he used another word started with question. And I think from there, he may have gone to you and kind of kicked some of this stuff off, but I still would like to know it. I think it would blow us away.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Kersey,
I'll ask Mr. Goodwin, do you think that we would in turn reduce our growth areas by getting this data? So should that slow us up in doing anything with those?
I don't think it would slow us up at this point. It might get us to review them once we see that data.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr.
Any
Dickinson.
estimate on a timeline to get this information?
For a qualified bid of this nature and this magnitude, just to do the RFP would probably take 3 months.
Yeah.
And then it'd be a month to have the bid out there for them to try and calculate what the prices would be. We've got to go through the full interviews with responsible qualified bids. I mean, we probably wouldn't talk about this again until August, September, if the board's ready to move forward with it as well. And even if we start, it's going to be a long drawn out process, just how, there's 40-some thousand parcels that every single one of them would have to be looked at. That's a very technical review process.
Tom might Mr. Chair, Tom might disagree with me. The things we've been talking about within the focus areas, which I still call gateways, really doesn't go into, doesn't make any difference whether it's 16 or 1,600. We're talking minimum distances between entrances. We're talking about vegetative plans, setbacks, these sorts of things. And whether it doesn't make any difference how many parcels, they're all going to have to live up with it or get an exception or a variance.
Exactly. I mean, the focus areas it's not in the ordinance, it's in the comprehensive plan, so it's also a guiding document. It's not in the ordinance, it's a requirement. So
Exactly.
there's flexibility there. And most of it's enhancement in those growth area and focus areas, like you just mentioned, the vegetative buffers or distances. So I don't think if you all would like to, we understand wanting to wait. We just don't want to publicly advertise something if you all aren't ready to move on it and make a recommendation on that.
Chair, I respect what Commissioner Kersey is saying, but I really think we're okay if we keep on going. Because of the general nature that we're laying it down, we wanted to apply regardless of those zonings, and regardless of whether it's 16 or 1600. You gotta meet certain requirements in those areas. And that's my understanding of it. I don't know if that satisfies your question or not.
It certainly clarifies that the only reservation I would express is we may want to reduce those growth areas when we see these numbers.
Yeah,
That's the part of it that I was
Yeah.
driving at.
I agree.
Yes, sir. Those will be discussed when we move to do the comp plan update. So that is something that'll be discussed, but it'll be separate from the focus areas themselves.
Mr. Dickerson?
Mr. Kuhn, could you and our highly capable staff draft a proposal so one of us can make a motion to meet all of staff's needs in getting this accomplished during our upcoming 7 o'clock meeting?
Yes, we'll be able to get one together for you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you. Any further questions for Mr. Eglin on this topic? Thank you, Mr. Eglin, for what must have been a lot of hard work to begin with.
Yes.
I will thank Matthias for y'all.
Thank Matthias for that.
Pass it on, please.
Absolutely be happy to pass that along to him.
Very good.
Thank you.
All right, it is 6:28 now. What I'll do, let's initiate the discussion on shelters. I'd like to break at 7:40. I'm sorry, 6:40. Thank you. I can't do math in my head. I'd like to break at 6:40. So we'll get 12 minutes into the discussion. We can pick it up again during the discussion period of the 7 o'clock meeting. So, Mr. Kuhn, I think we're calling you back to discuss shelters. If you would indulge us, sir.
Yes, sir. So the last meeting, we had proposed definition change for emergency shelter. There was some issues with that based on the reference of emergency shelter in the state code, and this board had requested a change, basically to change that previous emergency shelter definition to homeless shelter, and then have a new emergency shelter definition be added to account for the local, state, or federal entities. And I think we've got a couple different versions. Chairman had one that I believe is passed out on the dais now, correct?
Yes.
Would you like to?
I will, what I will do is I'll just briefly, so you have a packet in front of you, beginning with an email from from Mr. Goodwin to Ms. Buckler. Page 2 of that was a draft that I had proposed. I hadn't sent it around to everybody. I was just proposing towards the staff in case the staff was wrestling with what to do as a straw man to think about. We also have a draft that was handed out on a single sheet along with more background information from Commissioner Goodwin. I'm not married to any one of these definitions tightly. I think between them, there's a place to go that solves all of this. I will say, for the purpose of the page 2 of the little package, the only thing I was aiming towards for emergency shelter was not aiming towards providing any requirements for a shelter or any of the what must be in or what makes a shelter. To me, an emergency shelter is a shelter that's identified as part of an emergency response plan. That's what makes it an emergency shelter, is because a plan says this is a shelter. All the requirements that go with it depend on what kind of shelter it is and what it's doing.
I understand,
and
Mr.
so
Mr. Chairman.
Just,
That's why I titled it definitions and conditions, just to get the concept out there of what we're talking about.
Right, and just for the purpose of what's going on here, so that definition of an emergency shelter is a very thin definition, just pointing to it's a emergency shelter because it's identified as a part of emergency response plan. It provides temporary shelter. It's directed by the implementing plan, and I did say it could be used for other purposes, provided they don't adversely affect the capabilities of the shelter to be used as defined in the emergency response plan. So if it was to be used for something else because there was no emergency going on, as long as it didn't degrade the capability of the emergency shelter to serve the emergency response plan, then that could happen. The other one for homeless shelter was simply just trying to outline a simple discussion based on some things from Virginia and federal codes and recommendations that simply identified it was a temporary shelter for homeless individuals. We need to make this for less than 29 days instead of 6 months. That would be a change. And it doesn't require leases or occupancy agreements. There was a requirement I put in for supervision by at least one representative of the organization that operates a shelter continuously on site when occupied. There are other things it can provide, but that was just a straw man, and that's what that's about. Mr. Goodwin, why don't you present what you have as well, and then we can talk about what we want to do with all of these.
I think the purpose and the issue is kind of a roll-up of what we discussed last month when we brought the topic up, that there was a misconception in using the word emergency shelter, because emergency has a whole different connotation when you go to the state code. And what a lot of the citizen input was dealing with was more of a homeless shelter, which doesn't append. They think they were tying it to 40 degrees. They can make it 400 degrees. It doesn't make any difference. It's a homeless shelter. On the definitions on the first page, you'll see that every one of those comes straight out of the state code if they apply. Now, there is no definition of homeless shelter. There's no definition of emergency shelter, so we can plug that in. But the definitions that I have here on residency, emergency, local emergency, state of emergency, that's straight out of the Code of Virginia, copied, copy and paste. Now, I did, because there was no definition, and this is where I started bringing conditions in and realized that, went back and changed the heading, that there are conditions placed on the locality, and there are conditions at the state level and federal level that will be placed on the NGO, non-government organization. And I tried to word that to say, among others, these are the ones that I've already researched that you're going to have to meet if you're running a homeless shelter. All of the work on the emergency shelter that the county would undertake has to be approved by the Department of Emergency Services, and it's going to have to comply with the state building code and the fire marshal and occupancy and all those sorts of things. So everybody's got to go by the state code as it exists. So what I'm proposing there on the second page, next to the last, revise the ordinances to reflect the above concept of emergency and homeless shelters. Regardless of zoning, require non-government organizations to request a conditional use permit. I know that was a question of putting them through that, but I believe that neighbors and citizens at large with interest have a right to be heard, whether they're supporting it, whether they are opposed to it, or whether they have recommendations. This is bringing a whole new land use into areas of the county, and I don't think that the citizens, I think Ms. Purcell might agree with this, but I think we need to let this go out there and be transparent and get the public input on it. Since it's new, we may find out after going through this, we'll drop that. But going into it from the beginning, I think we need to give it some thought. And the advantages are right there. Between the county and the NGOs, we are providing for the well-being of all the residents in the county. And recognizing that we are not now, that being the homeless people. I think this approach will recognize and identify the responsibilities, the liabilities, and the ordinance expectations on both sides of the coin for all shelters in the county that fall under these two counties. The most important thing, and the citizens brought us this, who were adamant, separation of church and state. And we start getting in that, and the second part of the homeless shelter under what I would call conditions. And the last phrase, will not place undue burden on the county or the residents of the county as part of their systemic operation. The rumor vine is out there. Grapevine is confusing things. About using jaunt, which is paid for by the county, to take day trips every day to county facilities. That's systemic. That's a burden on the taxpayers to wherever they're going to county facilities. Ain't allowed as a condition in my proposal. It is a pure separation of church and state with no restrictions on the NGO other than the ones that we've identified here and you all may come up with. And I think it's a proper assignment of liabilities. So that's my research, and that's I was still editing this morning, so I'll take credit for any of the mistakes that are in there. And I apologize for my printer. It doesn't advance exactly right. I need a new one. But no pride of authorship. Whatever you all think, I just felt it was really necessary to get my thoughts on paper.
Certainly. All right, we are just about at 6:40. What I'd like to do, with that introduction in mind, we've now looked at these, can think about these, pick this back up during the discussion section of the main meeting and see if we can come to terms on, which I think we can. I don't think we're very far apart here in concept or wording, so.
As you wish, Mr. Chair.
Very good. All right, Mr. Barlow.
Are there any more copies of Mr. Goodwin's proposal? I don't know.
Oh, yeah, you came in after I hand them out.
Provide that for you, yeah.
That sounds good. I'd like to be able to see it.
Head on down the way towards you.
I did not share this with you all before the meeting. I was afraid that would violate FOIA of trying to carry on. I did share with the chairman. Verbally have talked with two members of the board separately. And press has a copy of this tonight. So there's nothing, I'm good with anybody hearing the thoughts.
Very good. All right, then what we'll do is we'll end the work session and we'll reconvene at 7 o'clock for the regular meeting.